Anna Cole always chose the far table in the station cafeteria, not because she liked the distance, but because it had been chosen for her long ago. The table stood near the wide viewing window where stars drifted slowly by, pale and quiet. The light there was softer, and the noise from the rest of the room faded just enough to make the silence feel heavier. Every meal cycle, Anna walked the same path, holding her tray with steady hands, keeping her eyes forward, never looking too long at anyone else. The cafeteria was large and clean, built to serve many species from many worlds. Long tables filled the center of the room, surrounded by moving shapes and low voices. Some beings spoke in clicks, others in smooth tones, others through small devices clipped near their throats. Anna understood most of it, but she rarely joined in. Words were not the problem. It was the looks that came before them and the pause that followed. As she passed the central tables, conversations often slowed. A few heads turned. Some eyes lingered for a second too long, then looked away. No one said anything unkind. No one ever told her to leave. That was the part that made it harder. There was no rule she could point to, no order she could challenge. There was only space. Empty space that followed her wherever she sat. Her mixed heritage was visible, even under the plain uniform she wore like everyone else. Her features did not fully match any one species represented on the station. Her eyes were shaped a little differently. Her skin carried a faint tone that shifted under certain lights. To some, she was a reminder of old conflicts, of treaties made too fast, of choices that had made others uneasy. To others, she was simply unfamiliar, and unfamiliar things were easier to avoid. Anna reached the far table and set her tray down in the same spot as always. The surface was smooth and cool beneath her fingers. She sat, straight-backed, and placed her hands neatly beside her meal. The chair across from her remained empty as it always did. So did the chairs to her left and right. There were no signs posted, no markings on the floor. Yet everyone seemed to know that this space belonged to her alone. She told herself she preferred it this way. Eating alone meant she did not have to worry about small talk or polite questions that never felt polite. It meant she could finish her meal without explaining herself. Still, some days the quiet felt too loud. The hum of the station, the distant sound of engines, and the soft clatter of trays only made the emptiness sharper. Anna picked up her utensil and began to eat slowly. She focused on the taste, on the warmth of the food, on the rhythm of chewing and swallowing. She had learned long ago that if she kept her movements calm and her face neutral, people noticed her less. Being unnoticed was safer than being stared at. Across the room, laughter rose from one of the central tables. A group of cadets leaned close together, sharing stories from training exercises. Someone slapped the table in amusement. Another spilled a drink and cursed softly, then laughed again. Anna did not look up, but she could picture the scene easily. She had been part of groups like that once, back when she first arrived on the station and hope still felt light. In those early days, she had tried sitting closer. She had smiled when others smiled, nodded when they spoke, offered small comments when there was space for them. The responses had always been polite but brief. Chairs shifted away. Conversations slowly turned inward. Eventually, someone would stand up with an excuse and others would follow. After a few weeks, Anna had learned to move herself before others moved away. The far table had become her habit, and habits were hard to break. She glanced at the window beside her, watching a cluster of stars slide past as the station adjusted its orbit. Space was wide and open, full of places where no one cared who you were or where you came from. She wondered, not for the first time, what it would be like to live somewhere without constant eyes measuring her differences. A soft sound reached her ears. Footsteps. She tensed slightly, then relaxed when they passed by her table without stopping. It happened often. People walked close enough that she could hear the faint scrape of boots or the glide of alien limbs, but they never slowed. She kept eating. Anna told herself she was used to it. Most days she believed it. She remembered her first week on the station cafeteria clearly. She had stood in line, unsure where to sit, scanning the room for an open place. A kind-looking woman had smiled at her then, gestured to a nearby table. Anna had felt a brief spark of relief. But when she approached, the smile had faded just a little. Someone else at the table had whispered something too quiet to hear. The woman had hesitated, then said there was no more room. Anna had nodded and walked away, pretending not to feel the heat rising in her face. Since then, the far table had been waiting. She finished half her meal and paused, resting her utensil on the tray. Her reflection stared back at her faintly from the window, mixed with the stars beyond. She studied it for a moment. She did not dislike what she saw. She just wished others could see it without fear or doubt. Anna was good at her work. Her instructors knew it even if they rarely said it aloud. She followed every rule, met every requirement, and never caused trouble. She thought that might be enough. It turned out that being capable did not always mean being accepted. A sudden sound of a chair scraping made her glance up. For a brief second, her heart lifted, then settled again when she realized it came from another table far away. She looked back down, a little embarrassed by her own reaction. She took another bite, slower now. The food tasted fine, but she barely noticed it. Her thoughts drifted instead to the rest of the day ahead, to training schedules and reports waiting to be filed. Work was easier than meals. Work followed clear rules. People spoke to her because they had to, and that made things simpler. Still, as she sat there, surrounded by empty chairs, she felt a familiar ache settle in her chest. It was not sharp enough to hurt, just heavy enough to remind her it was there. She had learned to carry it quietly. Anna finished her meal and placed her tray aside. She stayed seated for a moment longer, staring out at the stars. They did not judge. They did not whisper. They simply existed. When she finally stood, she did so with calm dignity. She pushed her chair in carefully, just as she always did. No one watched her leave. No one stopped her. The far table remained behind her, empty once again, waiting for the next meal cycle. She walked out of the cafeteria with steady steps, unaware that this ordinary moment, so small and silent, would soon be noticed by someone who refused to let the empty seat stay empty forever. Tom Miller had been on the station for only 6 days when he first noticed her, but once he did, he could not stop noticing the pattern. Each cycle at the same time in the same wide cafeteria filled with noise and movement, one table stayed quiet. One seat was always taken and every other seat around it stayed empty. The station was busy, crowded with travelers, officers and students from many worlds, yet that one space seemed untouched. It stood apart like a pause in a long sentence. Tom was human, tall in a way that made him stand out among some species and blend in among others. He had short brown hair that never stayed neat and eyes that carried a habit of watching everything twice. He was new to the station, new to its rules, and still learning its quiet customs. He had learned quickly which paths were fastest, which doors stuck, and which faces belonged to authority. But this empty table was something no one had explained. The first time he saw Anna Cole, he barely noticed her. She was just another officer in a plain uniform, sitting near the viewing window with her tray in front of her. He noticed the stars more than her, bright and distant, sliding past the glass. He took his own food and joined a group from his department, laughing when they joked about training drills and supply shortages. He did not look back at the far table. The second day he noticed the space around her. The chairs were empty, not pushed back like they had been used, but neatly in place, untouched. He frowned slightly, glancing around the room. Seats were hard to find near the center, and people often squeezed together without complaint. Yet no one even tried to sit near her. When a group passed close to the table, they shifted away as if following an invisible line. Tom felt a small pull of curiosity. He asked a casual question to the man beside him, nodding toward the far side of the room. The man shrugged and said nothing important, just that some people preferred space. The answer felt thin, but Tom let it go. By the third day it was impossible to ignore. Same time. Same table. Same woman. Same silence. Tom watched as Anna entered the cafeteria, her steps calm and steady. She did not scan the room like others did. She did not hesitate. She walked straight to the far table as if she already knew where she belonged. That was when it struck him. This was not preference. This was habit. And habits like that were rarely chosen freely. Tom started paying closer attention. He noticed how conversations slowed when she passed. How eyes followed her, then slid away. No one spoke to her, yet no one stopped her either. It was like watching a quiet agreement in action, one made without words. He felt a familiar tightening in his chest, the kind he remembered from stories his grandmother used to tell, stories about old places on Earth where people pretended not to see others. He spent that afternoon checking station guidelines under the excuse of learning protocol. He read rules about seating, shared spaces, and conduct. There was nothing. No rule that said anyone had to sit alone. No rule that allowed quiet exclusion. Officially, the cafeteria was open to all. Everyone had equal access. On paper, the station was fair. That night, Tom lay awake longer than usual. The image of the empty chair stayed with him. He told himself it was not his business. He was new. He did not understand the full situation. There might be reasons he did not know. Still, the thought felt wrong, and wrong things had a way of staying loud in his mind. On the fourth day, he chose a seat where he could see the far table clearly. He watched as Anna ate, slow and careful, her posture straight, her face calm. But her eyes rarely lifted. When they did, they went to the window, not to the people. Tom noticed how she lingered after finishing, staring into space as if waiting for something that never came. He asked another officer, quieter this time, about her. The answer was vague. Mixed background. Complicated history. Better not to get involved. The words were spoken softly like advice, but they felt like warning signs. Tom thanked the officer and said nothing more. By the 5th day, Tom was sure. This was not accident. This was choice. People were choosing silence. Choosing distance. Choosing comfort over fairness. And by doing nothing, they were forcing her to carry the weight alone. Tom sat with his tray untouched, watching Anna stand and leave the cafeteria. No one followed. No one spoke her name. The empty chair stayed empty even after she was gone. That, more than anything, settled it for him. He thought about his own past, about being the new kid in unfamiliar places, about the time someone had sat beside him when they did not have to. Those moments had mattered more than speeches. More than rules. They had said, without words, that he was not alone. Tom picked up his tray and stood. He did not walk toward the far table that day. Not yet. But as he left the cafeteria, he knew one thing clearly. The silence around that table was not neutral. It was a choice. And choices could be changed. Tomorrow, he decided, the pattern would not stay the same. Tom Miller stood in the cafeteria line longer than usual that cycle, holding his tray with both hands while the quiet noise of the station moved around him. The smell of warm food filled the air, mixed with metal and recycled oxygen. Voices overlapped, some sharp, some smooth, some translated through small devices. Everything felt normal, almost comfortable, yet Tom felt a steady pressure in his chest. He knew what he was going to do before he reached the serving counter, and that knowledge made every step feel heavier. He took his meal and turned toward the room. The central tables were already crowded, chairs pulled close together, bodies leaning in as people talked and laughed. A few heads turned toward him, then away. Nothing unusual. Tom scanned the room once, slowly, and his eyes landed where they always did now. Near the wide window, beneath the soft glow of distant stars, Anna Cole sat alone. She was already eating, her movements calm and measured. Her tray was placed neatly in front of her. The chairs around her were empty, lined up as if waiting for guests who never came. Tom watched as someone walked close to the table, then shifted away without stopping. The space around Anna remained untouched, like a clear circle drawn on the floor. Tom inhaled quietly. This was the moment. Not later. Not another day. If he walked away now, the pattern would stay the same. He told himself he was not doing anything dramatic. He was not breaking rules. He was not making a scene. He was simply choosing where to sit. He adjusted his grip on the tray and began to walk. He passed the first row of tables. Voices faded slightly behind him. A few people glanced up, surprised, then returned to their meals. Tom kept his pace steady. He did not rush. He did not hesitate. Each step felt deliberate, like placing a stone in water and waiting for the ripples. Anna did not notice him at first. Her eyes were focused on her food, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. Tom reached the far table and stopped. For a brief second, he wondered if he should say something before sitting down. A greeting. A warning. An apology. He decided against it. Words could wait. Actions mattered more. He set his tray down on the empty space across from her. The sound was small, barely louder than the hum of the station, but in that quiet corner, it felt clear. Anna's hand paused mid-motion. She looked up slowly, confusion flickering across her face before settling into surprise. Her eyes met Tom's, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Tom pulled out the chair and sat. That was it. No announcement. No challenge. No permission asked or given. Just a human sitting down. Around them, the cafeteria shifted. Conversations wavered. Someone dropped a utensil. A few heads turned openly now, watching. Tom felt the weight of attention press against his back, but he kept his focus on the table in front of him. He picked up his utensil and began to eat, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Anna blinked once, then twice. She looked around as if expecting someone to correct a mistake. No one came. The chairs stayed where they were. The station did not sound an alarm. Slowly, carefully, she looked back at Tom. He gave her a small nod, not a smile, just a quiet acknowledgement. "Hi," he said simply. Her lips parted, then closed again. "Hello," she replied, her voice calm but cautious. They ate in silence for a few moments. The quiet between them was different from the silence Anna was used to. It did not feel empty. It felt shared. Tom chewed his food, aware of every movement, every sound. He could feel eyes on them, but he refused to look away. Anna's hands were steady, but her shoulders had stiffened slightly. Years of habit did not fade in an instant. She took another bite, then another, slowly easing back into the rhythm of eating. Tom noticed she did not look at the window this time. Her gaze stayed closer, grounded in the space they shared. "First week?" she asked quietly. Tom nodded. "Just about." She hesitated. "The station can be complicated." He let out a soft breath. "Yeah, I've noticed." The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile, but it faded quickly. She looked down at her tray again. "You don't have to sit here," she said, not unkindly. "I know," Tom replied. "I want to." That was all he said. No speech. No explanation. The words hung between them, simple and clear. Anna studied him for a moment, searching his face for something she did not find. There was no pity there. No challenge. Just choice. Around them, the cafeteria slowly returned to its usual noise. Some people kept watching. Others looked away, uncomfortable. A few whispered. Tom ignored it all. He focused on eating, on the normal sounds of a shared meal. He felt a strange calm settle over him, the kind that came when he knew he was doing the right thing. Anna finished half her meal and paused, resting her utensil down. "They usually don't," she said quietly. "Don't what?" Tom asked. "Sit," she answered. "Here." He nodded. "I figured." She studied him again, this time more openly. "Why?" Tom considered the question. There were many answers he could give. He chose the simplest one. Because no one should eat alone if they don't want to. Anna looked away, her gaze drifting toward the stars outside the window. The light caught in her eyes, making them shine. She did not speak for a long moment. When she did, her voice was softer. "Thank you." Tom shrugged slightly. "You're welcome." They finished their meals without further conversation. The silence now felt comfortable, like two people sitting together on a long journey, content to share space without filling it with noise. When Tom stood to leave, he pushed his chair in neatly. "I'll see you around," he said. Anna nodded. "Yeah, I think you will." As Tom walked away, he felt the eyes return, heavier now, thoughtful. He did not look back. The choice had been made. The table was no longer empty. And the silence was broken. The next cycle, the cafeteria felt different before anything had changed. The room looked the same, sounded the same, and smelled the same, yet something unseen had shifted. People entered more slowly, their eyes moving with greater care. Whispers traveled farther than usual, carried on quiet glances and half-finished thoughts. Everyone had noticed what happened the cycle before. No one spoke about it openly, but the memory sat heavy in the air. Anna Cole arrived at her usual time. Habit guided her feet toward the far table near the viewing window. For a brief moment, she hesitated. The memory of Tom sitting across from her was still fresh, warm, and uncertain. She wondered if it had been a one-time thing, a rare moment that would not repeat. She pushed the thought aside and kept walking. She sat down and placed her tray carefully on the table. The chairs around her were still empty. For a heartbeat, the old feeling returned, quiet and familiar. But it did not settle the same way it used to. Something had changed inside her. The silence no longer felt permanent. It felt like a question. Across the room, Tom Miller entered the cafeteria with a small group from his department. He listened as they talked about routine matters, nodding at the right moments, but his attention drifted. His eyes found the far table almost at once. Anna was there, alone again, but he noticed something new. People were watching her table more openly now. The invisible line that once surrounded it had grown thin. Tom took his tray and followed the group to a central table. He sat, ate, and talked like nothing was different. He wanted to see what would happen if he did nothing. The choice he had made was already out in the open. Now it belonged to others. Several tables away, a young woman named Sarah paused with her tray in her hands. She was human too, newer than Tom, still unsure of her place on the station. She had seen him sit at the far table the cycle before. She had felt the tension ripple through the room. She remembered waiting for someone to stop him. No one had. Sarah looked at the crowded tables near her. There was space if she squeezed in, but the noise felt heavy today. Her eyes drifted toward the far table. Anna sat there quietly, her posture calm, her expression unreadable. Sarah felt a strange pull in her chest. If Tom could sit there, she thought maybe she could too. She hesitated, then shook her head slightly and chose a seat near the center. It was not time yet. Not for her. At another table, two non-human officers spoke softly. They watched the far table between sentences. One of them shifted uncomfortably. The human sat there, one said. Nothing happened. The other nodded. No rule was broken. Silence followed. They returned to their meal, but the thought stayed with them. As the cycle continued, the room slowly relaxed. Conversations grew louder again. Laughter returned in small bursts. Still, eyes continued to drift toward the far table. Anna felt them, but she did not react. She focused on her food, on the steady movement of her hands. Then, without warning, a chair scraped lightly against the floor. Anna looked up. A tall figure stood near the end of her table, tray in hand. He was not human. His movements were careful, his posture uncertain. He paused as if waiting for someone to object. No one did. "Is this seat taken?" he asked. Anna blinked. "No," she replied. He nodded once and sat down, leaving a respectful distance between them. He did not speak again. He simply ate. The sound of his tray touching the table echoed softly, louder than it should have been. The room noticed. A wave of quiet passed through the cafeteria. Heads turned. Whispers spread. No alarms sounded. No officials intervened. The station remained calm. Anna's heart beat a little faster, but she kept her movement steady. She did not smile. She did not thank him. She simply shared the space. At a nearby table, Sarah watched, her grip tightening on her utensil. Her pulse quickened. The line had been crossed again, this time by someone else. She felt courage rise in her chest, slow but sure. She stood up, tray in hand, and walked. Her steps felt loud even though they were not. She passed her old seat and kept going. When she reached the far table, she did not ask permission. She simply pulled out a chair and sat. Anna looked up, surprise flickering across her face, then something softer. She nodded. Soon another chair moved. Then another. Not all at once, not dramatically, but one by one. Some sat at Anna's table. Others chose tables nearby, close enough to be part of the space. The far corner of the cafeteria filled with quiet life. Tom watched from across the room, his chest warm with something like relief. He did not move. He did not need to. The shift was happening without him now. By the end of the cycle, the far table was no longer alone. The empty chairs were fewer. The silence had thinned, replaced by soft conversation and shared presence. Anna sat among others, still calm, still quiet, but no longer isolated. When the meal ended, people stood and left as usual. No speeches were made. No rule changes announced. Yet something had changed. The next cycle, the far table was not far anymore. Anna Cole no longer walked into the cafeteria expecting silence. The change did not happen all at once, and it did not feel dramatic, but it was real. Each cycle, the room greeted her with small signs that things were different. Chairs were no longer perfectly aligned around her table. A tray might already be there. Someone might nod as she passed. These were simple things, almost easy to miss, yet to Anna they felt larger than words. She still arrived at the same time, still wore the same uniform, and still followed the same path through the doors. But now, when she reached the far table near the viewing window, she was rarely alone. Sometimes there was one person waiting. Sometimes two or three. Sometimes the seats filled slowly after she sat. The empty space that once surrounded her had softened, broken into shared air and quiet voices. Anna noticed how people behaved differently now. They did not stare and look away as quickly. Some met her eyes. Some offered short greetings. Others simply sat and ate, comfortable in the shared silence. She did not rush to speak. She let things settle naturally the way trust often did. Tom Miller continued his routine much as before. He ate in different places, sometimes with friends, sometimes alone. When he sat near Anna, he did so without ceremony, the same way he sat anywhere else. If someone mentioned that things felt different in the cafeteria, he shrugged and said stations changed all the time. He did not explain himself. He did not tell stories. He did not claim credit. Once, a junior officer asked him quietly why he had chosen that table on that cycle. Tom thought for a moment, then smiled. "It just felt wrong not to," he said. The officer nodded as if that answer made perfect sense. Anna heard about that conversation later from someone else. She felt a warmth in her chest that surprised her. It was not pride. It was gratitude mixed with relief. She had spent so long carrying herself carefully, preparing for rejection, that she had forgotten how good simple kindness could feel. As days passed, the far table became just another table. People no longer whispered about it. New arrivals did not notice anything unusual. To them it was simply a place where people sat and ate. That, Anna realized, was the greatest change of all. One cycle she arrived late. Training had run longer than expected, and the cafeteria was already busy. For a brief moment, old habits stirred. She scanned the room, ready to turn toward the window. Then she stopped. There were open seats everywhere. She chose one near the center and sat without thinking. No one reacted. No one paused. Conversation flowed on. She laughed softly to herself, surprised by how natural it felt. The station itself seemed calmer. Small changes followed the larger one. Study groups mixed more freely. Work teams rotated without quiet resistance. The old, unspoken lines faded as people realized they did not need them. The station did not issue announcements or policies. It did not need to. Behavior had already shifted. Anna found herself speaking more. Not loudly, not all at once, but in small pieces. She shared thoughts during meals. She asked questions. She listened. People listened back. She learned names. They learned hers. Each exchange built on the last, steady and real. One evening, Anna and Tom happened to leave the cafeteria at the same time. They walked side by side for a few steps, neither in a hurry. The corridor lights hummed softly above them. "It's different now," Anna said. Tom nodded. "Yeah, it is." They stopped at a junction where their paths split. Tom turned slightly. "You doing okay?" Anna smiled fully this time. "I am." He returned the smile. "Good." That was all. They went their separate ways, no need for more. Far beyond the station walls, news traveled slowly. Other stations heard small reports. No incidents. No conflicts. Just quiet cooperation. Humans, it was said, had a habit of noticing things others accepted. A habit of acting without force. Of sitting where silence expected emptiness. Among the stars, that reputation mattered. Anna stood by the viewing window one night, long after the cafeteria had closed. She watched the distant lights drift by, feeling grounded in a way she never had before. She belonged here not because anyone allowed it, but because she was part of the shared space now. Somewhere else on the station, Tom finished his shift and headed to rest, thinking little of the choice he had made. To him, it had been simple. To the station and to those who watched from afar, it was something more. Sometimes, change did not come from power or command. Sometimes it came from a chair being pulled back and someone choosing to sit.